So a lot has happened since we last spoke. How have you been feeling over the last few days?
I think it's been really moving to watch the scenes playing out in Scotland in particular, but also in London. There have just been tens of thousands of people filing very quietly past Buckingham Palace, and then people lining the route of the Queen's coffin procession. I think I've been taken aback by just the scale of this event. I don't remember anything else like it in 2 decades of being a journalist.
So if you could just tell us a little bit about what's going on today.
All the action today has been centred on Edinburgh, where the King and the Queen Consort have been at the Palace of Holyrood House. They are going to be meeting the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and other important officials. But the key moment is going to be when the King and members of his family, his siblings in particular, will be walking behind the Queen's coffin as it departs Holyrood House. They'll walk along the Royal Mile and to the cathedral, St Giles's Cathedral, where this service of thanksgiving is taking place.
Can you tell us a bit about what we've seen today?
We've seen the King and Queen Consort Camilla attending Westminster Hall for a meeting of both Houses of Parliament, in which he gave a declaration in response to their motion of condolence. He has since flown up to Edinburgh, and he's been to the Palace of Holyrood House, which is where this very moving royal procession began, taking the Queen's coffin from there along the Royal Mile in Edinburgh to St Giles's Cathedral for a service of thanksgiving.
Wow. And, you know, it's been a really emotional 4 days, and we've seen Princess Anne following her mother's coffin and really stayed by her side for as long as she could have been. How do you think she's feeling?
I think it's really interesting to see the way that Princess Anne has been conducting herself. You know, she is famously perhaps more like her father in her sort of no-nonsense approach to life. But, you know, the grief and the suffering that she's going through has been very apparent and incredibly moving. We saw her curtsying to the Queen's coffin as it arrived at the Palace of Holyrood House, which was very, very emotional. And of course, she joined the coffin for the 6-hour journey down from Balmoral. She's also going to be on board the plane that brings the Queen's coffin back to London tomorrow night.
You know, we've seen some poignant images of Prince William and Prince Harry reunited with their wives. And, you know, it was a bit of a shock, but very welcome. Is it right to suggest that this could be the start of them moving forward together?
I think everyone would like to see this as the first step in some kind of reconciliation. I think it's too early to say that, you know, everything's fine again now. There's been a lot of difficult emotion on both sides, but I think both princes, the brothers, recognise that this was a time to show unity in honour of their grandmother, and that's why we saw them, you know, first William reaching out to his brother to invite him and Meghan, and then the Sussexes in return agreeing and joining forces with them.
Right. And will we see them together again? There's been reports that they will be walking side by side in the Queen's coffin procession, and obviously that's very different to Prince Philip's funeral, where they were separated by Peter Phillips.
Absolutely. I think it's too early to say yet what the formation will be. We'll know more in the coming days. But I think one would assume that all the Queen's grandchildren who want to will be taking part in the procession on foot behind the gun carriage carrying her coffin. Something that will be particularly difficult, I think, for William and Harry in particular, because as we all remember, they had to do that behind their mother's coffin. So it's going to bring back a lot of very difficult memories for them.
Yes, I can imagine. So Harry and Meghan, they've spent a week away from their children. Can we expect to see them joining the ceremonies?
I don't think we're going to see the Sussex children. I'd be very surprised. Given their young age, it's not really probably an appropriate moment for them to be seen in public. Look, nothing is being said about whether or not Archie and Lily are coming to join their parents, and that's for fairly obvious reasons of security, among others. But I would not imagine, given their very young ages, that they would be involved in any of the ceremonial aspects.
And have we had word on the Wales children either?
Nothing's been said yet about the Queen's great-grandchildren, and I think we have to look to previous similar events to realise that traditionally royal children don't attend church services, particularly big ceremonial events like this, until they're a little older. That being said, George and Charlotte have attended more public church services over the past year, so it's possible that they will attend, but I wouldn't expect any confirmation on that until much closer to the time.
Right. It has already been an incredible 4 days, and like many journalists, I'm sure you knew that at one point this would happen. But has there been anything that's shocked you or pleasantly surprised you from the way the public have responded?
I think the biggest surprise is just the scale of this moment. I think I've said already that in 20 years of being a journalist, I've not really encountered an occasion quite this momentous in terms of the number of people on the streets, in terms of the number of media who have descended on London for this. And we always knew it was going to be a huge moment. Actually living through it is just a completely extraordinary experience.
And I know that William and Kate did have some royal engagements planned. Can we assume that most of the royal engagements are going to be postponed until after this period of mourning? Ones that aren't obviously to do with the Queen's funeral?
I think we won't see any royal engagements until after this period of royal mourning ends, after the funeral, and even then it may be that some engagements are postponed. Certainly planning around future engagements will have been put on hold, so there may be a little bit of hiatus before things get back to normal.